There's only one species on this planet that's got no clue what it should eat. And it's got 2 legs and 2 arms and no brain. People, unfortunately, because we've had that ability removed from us because of our diet. If you start eating whole foods and good quality foods, you will resume, your body will be able to start talking to you and telling you what you should be eating. Animals don't have the issue with that, unless of course we stick them in a feedlot or something, then that changes. But if they're out in their natural surroundings, they know exactly what they require, and the only reason they don't get what they require is we limit their access to it. So we either limit their access by creating fences and lock them in an area for a certain amount of time that they can't access something else, or we lack the diversity in the plants that are there for them to select themselves. So.
Welcome to Wellness Spring podcast, where we cut through health confusion with transformative insights from leading experts. In this episode, we have the honour of diving deep into the remarkable story of Stuart Andrews, a trailblazer in the realm of natural sequence farming, NSF, and a true pioneer of transformative education. Stuart grew up with the challenges and dedication of his father, PA, and he has carried on that legacy with a unique gift for teaching NSF principles. As the owner of Tarwyn Park Training and Forage Farms, Stuart has expanded his father's work by introducing a diverse range of plants and animals. On arrival at Stuart's farm, we were struck by the freshness and the healthy glow of his land and animals. Alongside his journey with NSF, Stuart's passion extends to Forage Farm, where nutritious farm-to-doorstep food is not only a product, but a commitment to health, sustainability, and community. We had the pleasure of meeting his wonderful wife, Megan, and their 2 sons, all working hard to make that vision a reality. Join us as we explore Stuart's journey and the incredible impact of his work on farming, food, and the future. Welcome, Stuart, to Wellness Spring. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
Nice to be here.
Could you please explain what is natural sequence farming for the listeners?
I guess the best way to describe it is natural, if we describe it by the terminology how it's been named. Natural is looking at nature and how nature operates. The sequence is a sequence of events which starts with a rain event. So in Australia, all of our sequencing starts with rain events, so plant growth, all of those sorts of things. The hydrology kickstarts. And then farming is understanding those principles or the function of the landscape and overlaying a production system on top of that, which tends to get forgotten because generally what we do is we go to a landscape and we overlay a production system without actually understanding how the landscape functions first. So it's about understanding that function and getting that working, and then you can overlay your production system over the top.
Yeah, and I believe this was discovered by your father, Peter Andrews.
Yeah, so my dad, PA is how I refer to him as, he has this ability to see the landscape in ways that probably most other people can't. And so he was able to see these patterns and processes in the landscape and then work out how you can subtly help those functions and those natural patterns work. Yeah.
Yeah, having been around him, I know he's a creative genius. He's so intuitive the way he reads the land, and having spoken to you last week, I know that your gift is actually teaching.
I don't know that I've got too many gifts, but maybe I have more of an understanding of people and how they learn than say PA does. So yeah, that's probably, I don't know if it's a gift or not, but it's certainly something that I was given that he wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I believe we all have our unique talents and skills, and could you please explain
what actually happens in your Tarwyn Park training, because it's over 4 days, I believe.
Yeah, so we've split it up in over the 4 days. We look at 5 key areas, and that is slow the flow, let all plants grow, be careful where the animals go, filter is a must know, and return to the top to recycle a lot. So we break those 5 components into over the 4 days. So on the first day we look at slow the flow. First of all, it's about understanding and reading the landscape, and then how can you go about slowing the flow? What are the things that you can do? And then on day 2 we're concentrating more on the plants. So why do plants grow? See, a lot of plants people demonise because they consider them to be weeds, which is fair enough, because there's times where if you've got too many of those sort of plants in the system, then productivity is not going to be functioning so well if you're running livestock or cropping. So we look at reading the plant to understand what's the plant telling you about the condition of the landscape, and what is it that we possibly could do to help it do its job so it doesn't need to be there anymore, and we can have a plant that's more suitable. And then be careful where the animals go, because the Australian continent principally evolved without the hard-hoofed animals which we currently use in our production system. It's understanding that this landscape, the Australian landscape on settlement, is more sensitive to those hard-hoofed animals because it didn't evolve with those as part of that landscape. So what areas are most sensitive? How can we manage those animals around so that we still can have them as part of our production system, but they're not causing the damage? And then we've got filtering, so we're talking about reintroducing wetlands into our system. So how do we go about building and creating wetlands so that we're filtering our nutrients? And then as a result of the nutrients being filtered, how can we utilise the fertility that's been captured and take it back up to the top of our system so it starts the process again? That's pretty much the makeup, and so we give people the tools of how they can go about doing all those things.
Yeah, and how do you bring the fertility back up?
There's various ways. You can move fertility by baling up biomass, so plants, whatever plants are growing down in your lower area, wherever you're capturing fertility, you can harvest that biomass in whatever means makes the most amount of sense to you. You can use your animals. They're not the most efficient way of moving fertility, because the way they move fertility is in their manure or their urine, of which if you put it higher up in the landscape it could be washed away again. So you sort of defeat the purpose a little bit depending on how you're managing your landscape. So moving a product is by far the best and most efficient way of achieving that. There's other gains that come from moving the material that you don't get from moving the manure, and that is that any material, organic matter that's moved, has an ability to hold a considerable amount of water. And so if you can capture that water high up in your landscape, that water isn't now going to come down the bottom to destroy the bottom of your system. So, there's a lot of benefits. But then, some people don't want to spend that money. They can't see the value in spending that money to move that material. But that's a personal choice. It's up to everybody. All we ask is that people give it a go, and if they get the production results, I'm sure they'll continue to do it.
Yeah, and who is your target market? Is it for small farmers, hobby farmers, large-scale farmers?
It doesn't matter. Anybody who's on a piece of landscape, doesn't matter. Anybody is able to utilise this information. Doesn't matter whether you're a suburban person working on your backyard. You can do it in your backyard. It just becomes a lot easier because it's a smaller part of landscape, and you can probably do it with hand tools rather than machinery. It's applicable to anybody. The people that would come to our course probably wouldn't be people working in their backyard, because the course is not, I don't believe it's expensive, but it's certainly a reasonable amount of money to have to spend, and anybody who's not getting some sort of production off of their landscape would probably, they probably wouldn't want to spend that money on education, but who knows. We get all sorts of people coming. We get people coming along that are looking to buy a piece of land, even if it is only a small block. So they want to know, what do I look for in buying that piece of land? Do I want a place that looks perfect with all nice grass everywhere? Is that what I want? Because that's what most people think they want. But then I realise that landscape is probably 5 minutes away from falling apart. So we can teach them the signs to look for, read the landscape and understand what the potential is, and what position is that piece of landscape in today. And so we get all varied types. I guess the ones that we would be focusing on are the ones that are going to have an impact as soon as possible on their landscape.
Yeah, well, you mentioned cost, and I believe there's a huge cost to buy chemicals to put on the land. So that would be enormous. And a lot of the arguments people say to us, the farmers, as we've been travelling around, is either it's my land is too flat, or it's too dry, or it's too hilly, it's too wet. You know, is there a particular type of land, or can your system be used on any type of land?
It's probably fairly important that it rains on that piece of land at some point. It doesn't have to rain all the time, but it probably has to rain sometimes. So I don't think there's any piece of landscape that it doesn't rain on that somebody's having a production system on. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a production system there. So this is relevant everywhere. There's no land that's too flat. I hear the same things all the time. My land's too flat. Well, unless you live on Lake Eyre, it's not too flat. And even Lake Eyre there's things that you can do to make Lake Eyre more productive, you know. But most people don't live in a true flat landscape. Wherever they are, water runs off. Otherwise, they are living in the middle of a lake. Yeah. So this is appropriate. Now, the difference being the flatter the landscape, the cheaper and the easier it is to fix. The downside is that the areas you would possibly be wanting to work on may not necessarily be on your block of land, the piece that you have the management over. It could be on another person's piece of land, because as you get flatter, everything moves wider and spreads out. So, yeah, I mean, but it's applicable everywhere. Doesn't matter.
For me, having not grown up in the countryside, I found it hilarious when Brian and I stopped at Lake Eyre and it was all shrubs, and the gentleman said he was a commodore of the yacht club there, and he said, come back in a few months, bring your trailer sailor, and you'll have a completely different experience. So, yeah.
It's an amazing country, this one, yeah. But, I mean, a big part of the problem is that the centre of Australia never used to be barren. It used to have plenty of vegetation in there, which it has the ability then to have a completely different climate. But it's become arid, over the years, long before white man came here. It was becoming arid, so therefore it doesn't have the potential impact on the rest of the continent, or at least the eastern part of the continent, that it could have. So, anyway.
And going back to costs, a lot of people say, they can't afford to lose production in the transitioning of the land. Like, how long, if someone was a conventional farmer using chemicals, how long realistically, obviously I guess it depends on the size of land, but how long does it take to transition and be able to grow healthy crops?
Oh, look, it's pretty hard to put numbers on things. Anybody that starts putting numbers on things, you probably should question it. But from what I've seen, to take let's talk rather than being conventional or non-conventional. If we talk about a productive and a non-productive landscape, you can take a non-productive landscape into being a productive landscape probably in a period of about 2 to 5 years. Now, my advice is always to people that if you are going to change your management system, whatever it might be, you do it in small sections. Never do it the whole lot of the time, because it's irrelevant as to whether it's successful in that transition. In your head, that is the area that beats you, because I'll give you this scenario. If you're the person that's changing your management system and you have a whole heap of friends around you, farming friends around you, more than likely most of your farming friends think like you do, as you do today.
Yeah.
If you decide for whatever reason that you would like to change what you're doing, that will be the thing that will be the hardest thing to deal with, because most of the people around you will either think you're an idiot, or you'll think they think you're an idiot, or they don't want to talk to you, or you can't talk to them about what it is you're doing. So that's, I think, the most difficult thing, where if you just take a small section of your farm and do something different, you don't have to tell anybody. You can just do your own thing. You do your little experiment and you trial it, and if you can see that is making suitable changes or benefits to your landscape, you can then tell your friends. Now, or come and show them, which is even better, show them the results. Now, if they still think you're an idiot or choose to think you're an idiot, then maybe you need to find new friends. Because at the end of the day, you need to surround yourself with people that support you, not denigrate you, no matter what you do. And so, that's my advice to anybody. Don't just go and change over and think because everybody else is telling you should do something differently, that you should change instantly, because it'll more than likely be a downfall.
I totally agree with that, and it's really important to have people to support you and watch your back. Who or what inspired you to buy Forage Farms?
So Forage Farms came out of our training program. So what I would get are people saying to me, okay, I understand why you think that having plants other than the ones that we want to use, grasses or whatever, as part of our system, weeds. I can understand where they fit, and I understand what the importance of those plants are. But if I have a landscape that's only growing those plants, how is it that I make a living? And I went, well, that's pretty valid. That's fair enough. For me, that's not an issue because I'm relatively confident that I'll move out of that system and into a system where my productivity is fine. But for somebody who's not sure, then they could be in all sorts. So we looked at what system could we run that allows the landscape to grow the plants that it requires today, if those plants happen to be predominantly weeds or ones that we would refer to as weeds. Then what production system can we overlay over that landscape while it gets to rebuild? We go out and we do whatever we're going to do to get the hydrology functioning, that's fine, but it still doesn't necessarily create productivity straight away. So what can we do? So that's why we looked around and we looked at Joel Salatin and stuff that he'd been doing in America by stacking enterprises, multiple different layers of enterprises, and particularly the chickens and the pigs, because they predominantly, most of their food source is an imported food source, which means they're not requiring what is produced on the land that day, like a cow requires herbage, mostly grass, but certainly a percentage of weeds as well, but not all weeds. They need grass to be able to gain weight and so forth. So chickens and pigs are what I would determine as primary colonisers. So like the plants that are on that piece of landscape who are primary colonisers, they're coming on there to start the process of rebuild, start the succession. So too, do we match that piece of landscape with an animal or a tool that's going to complement those plants? So chickens and pigs complement them, and just so happens chickens and pigs also like to browse on broadleaf plants rather than grass plants. So they're a perfect fit. So that's why we started Forage Farms. We thought, well, let's trial it. Let's see, can that work here? Is it going to be productive? Is it something, is it a model that people can use if they have a landscape that is degraded? Can you do it? So that's how Forage Farms came about.
Plants, I believe, are there to repair the land, like you said. But why doesn't the government agree with that? Because everywhere we go, in most regions in Australia, there's signs up, if you see these weeds, you must kill them. And from speaking to farmers, we know that they get fined up to $1,000 a week for not destroying the weeds. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because, at the end of the day, if we create a landscape that is degrading, then the plants that need to come in to rebuild it will be the plants that grow there. So if we are degrading our landscape, then they're right. That's 100%. That's exactly what will happen. Those plants will come into the system, and they may well even dominate for a short period of time. So our government, because they're relatively short-sighted, then outlaw these plants or consider them to be noxious weeds. But they're only responding to the conditions that we create in our landscape or have created in the past. So it's a nonsense, really, especially if you go on a killing rampage to remove these plants, whether you're enforced to or not. If you go on a killing rampage to get rid of the plants, but you haven't solved the reason why the plant's there, then all you get is more of them. So it makes absolutely no sense at all. So, yeah, look, it's difficult for people navigating their way through all of that component when you've got governments or government officials creating these laws that we have to follow when they have no clue how a landscape functions themselves. So, but anyway, that's the part and parcel of what we've got, so we have to work our way through it.
Yeah. But when you started selling your chicken eggs, because you've got a niche market for that now, you came across some challenges with your competitors. How did you deal with that?
I think the only way you can deal with, I wouldn't call them competitors, they're just other people producing, not the same way we're producing in a different way. The only way you overcome that is to grow a product that's better than theirs. And we know that this system produces a better quality product than the other systems that are out there. So I think that's the easiest way to do it. The hard part is getting our product into the marketplace and getting an opportunity, because our product does cost more to produce, so therefore ours maintains a higher price in the store. So to get somebody to look at our product on the shelf and decide to choose that over anything else, well, some of it's luck of the draw. I guess having packaging that looks appealing, because people are unfortunately fairly easily fooled, I guess, by, they look at something, the packaging looks nice, so that draws them to that packaging or whatever. But I don't really know. At the end of the day, it's a time thing. All we need are people to try our products. From then, that's up to us. If we haven't produced a product that is better than others, then they probably should buy the others. Yeah, we let the customers choose at the end of the day.
How can you see the way forward with helping to educate the mass about the benefits of eating healthy, organic, or should I say natural food? Because not even if it says organic doesn't mean to say there's no chemicals or pesticides, herbicides.
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? I mean, you think an organic product should be the best quality product on the shelf, but is it? And I would suggest that the answer is no, not necessarily. Once upon a time it probably was. If you were working with smaller organic farmers, then I would say probably 100% you'd be right, because most of the smaller operations are in it for a reason, and that is to produce a better quality product. But probably 20 years ago, we had larger producers coming in because there was a financial benefit to be organic. I don't think they're doing it for the same reasons, therefore the quality of the product isn't as good. How do you get consumers on board? I mean, I guess the easiest way to do it is to meet the price. The trouble is that if you lower the price of a better quality product, then that person ends up going broke, because they probably can't produce it for any less because it's costing them that much. That's why the product is at that price. I guess the easiest way, or the best way to do it, is to increase the price of the other products. That would be the sensible way. So if you increase the price of those products, then everybody's paying something similar, and then they can make a choice on quality alone, and not what it looks like, what it tastes like. Yeah, so you can have a piece of fruit that has blemishes on it, and that's probably the piece you should eat, rather than the piece that's absolutely immaculate, because the piece that's absolutely immaculate, nothing wants to eat it. So either nothing wants to eat it because it lacks any nutrient density, or everything else has been killed, so it can't eat it. See, there's an interesting thing. You look at fruit. I was telling people at this field day the other day that if you see birds come in and take a peck or a couple of pecks out of all of the bits of fruit on a tree, why do you think they do that? Because it's all shit.
Oh.
Yeah. So if the fruit is actually good, they'll eat the whole lot rather than have pieces out of all of them. But they're going around to find which piece is actually valuable to eat, which one has the most amount of sugar in it, because which one's going to give them the most amount of nutrient density. I mean, you think about it, if you're a bird, what's the one thing you fear? You fear something else eating you. Where's the other thing that's going to eat you come from? Predominantly from the sky. So you're not going to hang around eating a trying to find a piece of fruit that's crap and not got the energy. You want something that's got a lot of energy in it and a lot of goodness, so you can eat as much as you require really quickly and then move on, and then you don't get eaten. They're not going to go around all the time and just take pieces out. It's just that they can't get the value out of those pieces of fruit. So yeah, I mean, our animals and the insects are way smarter than we are. They'll tell us everything we need to know. Yeah, if an insect is prepared to eat a piece of fruit, then you would say that the piece of fruit is good enough for you to eat. Now, if the insect eats the plant, then the fruit that's produced on that, if it produces any fruit, which probably it won't, but if the insect eats the plant, that means the plant is not healthy enough to grow a decent piece of fruit, or whatever it's going to be growing. That's the way it works.
Oh, that's interesting. And I know when we chatted before, you said that the cows, for example, if they're not feeling well, they'll be drawn to a certain plant. So they're very intuitive as well and know what they need to heal, and they only eat enough that they feel better, and then they leave the plant alone.
There's only one species on this planet that's got no clue what it should eat. And it's got 2 legs and 2 arms and no brain. People, unfortunately, because we've had that ability removed from us because of our diet. If you start eating whole foods and good quality foods, you'll resume, your body will be able to start talking to you and telling you what you should be eating. Animals don't have the issue with that, unless of course we stick them in a feedlot or something, then that changes. But if they're out in their natural surroundings, they know exactly what they require, and the only reason they don't get what they require is we limit their access to it. So we either limit their access by creating fences and lock them in an area for a certain amount of time that they can't access something else, or we lack the diversity in the plants that are there for them to select themselves. So.
And because you're talking about diversity, how did you diversify your land?
By diversifying the animals, that's a good way of doing it, which is what we've done here. So as soon as you change the species of animals, then you change the species of plants, which increases. So some animals, will have a closer relationship with a certain lot of plants, so those plants will grow more so for that animal, and then another one for a different plant, and so you get all of these different plants in there. But you can alter it in all sorts of ways. You can alter it by how you graze. If you're running grazing animals, how you graze, whether you graze hard, whether you graze soft. It alters how the plants that are required to be there in that piece of landscape respond to the management only. So if you need more plants into there, you can create a response, a change, just by using the tool that you have available to you.
Yeah, because we've spoken to some grazing farmers and they have over 100 different species of grass, for example.
If they've got 100 species of grass, they've only got one. Therefore, they don't have diversity.
That's a very good point.
So, I'll paint this picture for you then. It does frustrate me a little bit when I hear these people talking about their wonderful grasses that they've got. But given that Australia goes through periods of wet and dry, how are those grasses responding to the dry? Well, generally, most grasses dry off. So if you're focusing on having a landscape with 10, 20, 30 species of grass, you've still got a desert. Because if you don't have green plants, then you have a desert. That is the technical meaning of a desert. So all of those people who think they're doing a wonderful job and growing lots of species of grass only, then they are creating deserts at certain times of the year.
Right. And recently we've met a few interesting people who have designed natural fertilizers. What are your thoughts on those? Could that be the way forward for changing from chemicals to natural?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, there's plenty of good products out there that people can make them on their own farm, brew stuff up to increase biology and all that sort of stuff. I mean, you can do as much as you like. What it does is it shortcuts time, so it speeds the process up. If you allow plants to do it, and you have all plants as part of your system, the plants associated with the biology in the soil will do all of that stuff for you. But it might take, years for that to happen. Or you can be brewing up your own biology or your own fertility to speed the process up. That's fine. It's no different. It's no different to what we talk about. You can go out and build contours to get your hydrology working and wait for it to rain. Or if you've created the system where you're able to capture some water at the lower part of your landscape, you can pump that water back up to the top of your system and start the process without the rain. It's up to you. You know, you can get the system moving faster, or you can wait. Depends what you've got going on and how critical it is that your system works soon.
Yeah. Going back to your training, because I know a lot of people have asked me this, if they do the 4-day training, are they set to go then, or will they still need follow-up from you, or do advanced classes or something like that?
No, most people should have the skills to be able to go out and implement something at the time they leave our course. I think the one thing that people probably require after is an assistance in how to read the landscape. What to do is not such a problem. It's where to do it. That seems to be a common theme. That, you know, because they might come and do wherever they do the course, they go back to their own block of land, and I think they just get a little bit confused. And you know, humans are really good at overthinking everything. We spend our entire time looking at complexity rather than simplicity. If we focus on the simplicity, then we don't let the complexity stop us from doing anything. But I think people go home and they start looking at their landscape, and all of the things that they learned at the course to read the landscape they forget or can't do. So they sometimes need, you know, that other eye to come over it and say, yep, there. Usually what I get is, oh look, I've got these ideas, but I would just like it if you could, or someone could come and confirm for me that I'm right. You know, I usually say, listen, just do it anyway. Doesn't matter, you'll find out. Yeah. You know, you're better off to be doing something. But if you want me to come, that's fine. I'll come, or someone else can come there, and we can certainly show you where to start, if that's what you require. If you need more, if you need assistance to build it, well, then we can arrange that too. You know, we can arrange people to help you do that. And everybody's different. You know, when I started the training, I just assumed everybody would be like me. They jump on a machine, start building it. Apparently not. Apparently those people are few and far between. You know, most people are too busy, don't have the skills, don't want to, whatever. So they'd rather bring in somebody else, which that's fine. It's just, you know, it's just a cost, isn't it? So if it's a cost that you're prepared to wear, then that's what you do. And
you know, the initial outlay is far cheaper than paying for chemicals every year to keep the crops growing.
Well, see, the thing is with the work that we talk about is you only have to do it once. It really frustrates me a bit when people start saying, oh, well, it's a cost. Well, so is putting up a bloody fence. But it doesn't stop you putting up the fence, is it? You consider the fence to be part of your management. Why the hell wouldn't you consider managing your water to be part of your management? No different. You know, and maintaining the fence, how's that different to maintaining the contour? If the fence wire, if you get a broken wire in the fence because a kangaroo went through it, do you just leave it unbroken? Or do you go and strain it back up again? Well, you go and strain it back up again. Yeah. So if you've let your cattle or something walk over the top of a bank and it's not working as well as it could, you go back and fix it up. It's, you know, it's just stupid stuff. You know, and I think that's a lack of understanding. Look, at the end of the day, if people don't see the value in doing something, then don't do it.
Exactly.
If you think about it like this, let's say someone comes and does our course and they spend $3,000 to come and do the course. They go home and they spend, I don't know, $3,000, $5,000, $6,000 putting in contours. They would pay that system off, the training and the courses and the contours, they'd probably pay off within the first 2 to 3 years. From then on, unless you're only going to live 2 or 3 years, I guess that's not so good, but if you're going to live longer than that, then it's all productivity from there. You can't get that out of chemicals or fertiliser because you have no control over the cost. That cost will continue to go up year on year on year on year forever. And there's all the other components with utilising any of those products, but you know, that's a personal choice. But this, you have the ability to at least manage the cost. Once you've done it, that's the cost. Once it's done, you don't have to do anything. It all works by itself.
Yeah, and for a lot of people listening, the cost of your training is probably the same price as what they're paying for chemicals for 1 year only, or less.
No way. No, there's people's chemical bills, depending on the size of their place, would be, anywhere from 10 to hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars of chemicals. No, there's no comparison there. Well, I wouldn't even bother trying to compare those two.
Yeah.
It's probably more you would focus on the fertiliser. So the fertiliser inputs are something to grow a product rather than a chemical which is to kill a product. If you can minimise how much fertility leaves your landscape, then you're already more productive. So the numbers we use, 80% of the fertility leaves your landscape through erosion. That's the movement of water either across the surface or through the profile of the soil, leaching nutrients away from plants' roots. That's where most of your fertility is lost. If you can minimise that, then there you've already made money without having to bring anything on at all. So, but see, people don't realise. They don't realise how much fertility leaves their landscape every time it rains. Doesn't matter whether it's moving off or moving down. Either way, they're losing. They now need a plant, if it moves down, to bring it back up. Well, if they haven't got the suitable plants, they're not bringing it back up. Therefore, it's lost.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, really. I think we're living in a draining system rather than a, fertility system, because, like you said, when it rains, everything gets washed away and washed into our rivers. And
when your rivers start dying, whether it be the species living in the river or the plants living along the river, it's a result of the surrounding landscape that feeds it. Now, even if it's not chemicals, it could be excess fertility. Now, that excess fertility could be natural fertility, it could be artificial fertility. It's irrelevant. If the lowest part of your landscape, being your creeks, your rivers, your gullies, are dying, the surrounding landscape's already dead.
right.
End of story. It's like frogs. Frogs and bees are the indicator of the health of a landscape. Drive around and find out how many places where there's water have actually got frogs. Not many. That tells you the landscape that feeds that area is dead, because the frog can't live there. That's how it works. So you got no frogs, you got a dead landscape. So there's a good test for you. You go anywhere around and you can find most landscapes don't have frogs.
I'll be making note of that and listening when I go on all these farms.
Yeah, if there's water there, it should be absolutely manic. In the evenings, you should hear nothing but this noise of frogs. Don't hear it.
How can we get everybody collaborating? Because it doesn't matter if you're a regen farmer, holistic farmer, whatever type of farmer you want to call them. At the end of the day, people are farmers and they're trying to do the best to restore the landscape. But how can we get that?
Okay, the best way you can do it is stop labelling people. That's the first part. So if you don't label someone as being conventional or regenerative or organic or whatever, then it means that everybody's on similar footing.
Yeah.
That's probably the first and the most important part. It's once you label someone or more stick them in a box. Labelling them is not such a problem. But if you stick them in a box, then it means that nobody else is allowed in the box and you can't get out of your box. So you're now restricted on what you can do. So I think that's probably the most important part. And then for those people who are running education programs like we are, it's not to believe that whatever they're teaching is the be-all and end-all. Everybody wants to think that they've got the secret, the secret bullet. Nobody's got the secret bullet. Nobody has. But all of the things combined make a really great toolbox to have available to you. And so not to try and express to people that you can do all this, you just do this bit and you'll be right, because that stops everybody else being involved as well. I think those two things are probably the two most important components.
The main reason I mentioned it is because regen is the buzzword at the moment. Everywhere we go, people are talking about regenerative farming.
Yeah.
And it's like, unless you're doing regen, nobody wants to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a buzzword. It's around at the moment. I think it's probably more about the consumers than anything else, I think, rather than the farmers. I think it's probably more important that consumers realise that there can be a different way, so that a terminology probably works better for a consumer than a farmer. So, but I know it's difficult to manage that crossover. But if you don't have something that differs for the consumer, or how are they going to know that the product is potentially going to be different? So, yeah, I guess that was the point of regenerative, was about, educating the consumers. But what's happened is that you've now got farmers who feel that they have to be regenerative, and so I hear people come and do our training that I might ask them what they consider themselves to be, and they might say regenerative, and I say, well, what are you doing? And, some of what they're doing is not what I would consider to be, actually probably regenerating. It's probably pretty much most the same, but.
What would be your definition of regenerative farming?
You would have to be aggrading your soil. So, you can either degrade or upgrade. Okay. So we talk about upgrading. So if you're building soil, increasing diversity, increasing biology, then you are aggrading your landscape. Yeah. Anything other than that, you're degrading your landscape. So you'll find that'll thin that field down fairly consecutively. And so people that might hold high and mighty believing that they're doing a great thing, if they can't fit that, that one of those, then they're quite possibly not doing what they believe. So I think that's probably an easier way. Maybe it's a bit hard-nosed to be like that, but what's important is either we're building our landscape or we're not. Yeah.
And we've been travelling for a couple of years, as we mentioned, around Australia, looking for land to buy a holistic retreat. And we were so devastated by the state of a majority of the land being degraded, the lands that we've seen. And people are like, oh, if it's only for holistic, just buy dirt, it doesn't really matter. But it's just the fact that we were so shocked to see the amount of degradation. And for me, especially if I want to grow fruit and vegetables on the land, I believe our health is our best wealth. And it doesn't matter if you're vegan or a carnivore or cannibal, whatever you want to call it, whatever you eat, it all starts from the soil. So whatever we put into the animals, whatever we grow for fruit and vegetables, it's what we're putting into our bodies. And if I had a Ferrari, I'd be putting the best fuel into my tank. And this is how I operate in life with my food that I eat.
Yeah, but look, the beauty is that the information is out there today that you can turn a degraded landscape around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't matter if it was degraded. All you got to do is have the skills to know what you can do. Now, it depends on what sort of production system you're wanting to put on the degraded land, which was what we talked about with Forage farms.
Yeah.
If you were planning on running beef cattle or sheep or something like that, and you have a degraded landscape, you're probably not going to produce very good quality meat. But if you're wanting to grow plants, then you can bring in nutrients, you could bring in mulch, get your hydrology functioning, and those plants will be perfectly healthy, even though the landscape they're growing in at that point is degraded, because you can get the system working. So it's a matter of complementing the piece of land with the production system that piece of land is capable of handling today.
Thank you.
That's as easy as it is, and that's why it's important to be able to go around and look at a piece of landscape and determine, like, as I said, you could go and look at a piece of landscape that's got beautiful pasture. That doesn't mean it's not degraded. It just means that there's potentially a lot of chemical or a lot of fertiliser utilised to maintain that. I mean, you go and look at a horse stud. Look how beautiful horse studs look. They're sick. That whole landscape is sick. It's growing on artificial fertiliser and chemical. So, therefore, it's not a healthy landscape.
Yeah. So, besides your delicious pasteurised and home grass-fed food, what is your go-to for wellness?
Outside of our own food?
Well, your wellness, could it be meditation? What do you do? Because you said you're a workaholic.
Well, that's pretty much what I do. That's what I do. I work. That's, I most of the time I guess I enjoy what I do. What I like is that we have a diversified business. So Sunday I was delivering a field day on natural sequence farming. Today I'm fixing chicken houses here that got destroyed in a storm last year. That's what keeps me sane.
Right.
And so I can mentally I'd have to say I'm pretty strong. We've been through a lot in our family, and what I'm always conscious of is that most people are probably not as mentally strong as I am. Doesn't mean that I'm immune from anything either, because I have down days as well. But that's what keeps me going, is change. Like the landscape.
Yeah.
How does the landscape keep doing what it does? It does it by changing. So it goes through seasons, it goes through cycles of wet, cycles of dry, changes the plant composition. All of those things create change, and that's what keeps it going. So long as we have change in our life, we're not just doing the same boring stuff over and over again, then that helps. Holiday would be good every now and then. I'm probably just about due for a holiday, or we are all just about due for a holiday. And I would say that our work-life balance is probably not how it should be right now. There's probably too much work and not enough rest, which we are working on changing. But you have to get to the point where you've got other people that can fill your voids. So when you go away, you can feel comfortable that everything's going to be okay. I never worry about it. I leave and I know everything will be right. But other people here, namely Hamish and Megan, probably tend to worry a lot, which means they don't get to enjoy time being away. So you've got to get it so that they feel comfortable, and then so that's probably how I am dealing with that. I'm not sure about the rest of the team. You'd probably have to ask them how they deal with it. I think they'd probably rather go away on a holiday. But yeah.
And do you have any sort of positive self-talks that you give yourself, or?
I listen to podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I mean, we're mostly, our biggest interest is on eating well.
Yeah.
So we're focused on, what can we do, whether it be, what components we're utilising in our diet, not just where we source the products that we consume, but what the combination of products are, I guess. Like minimise things that are simple, keep everything to real food.
Yeah.
I think that helps your head a lot. If you have foods that are simplified, then I think your ability to manage outside stresses are really reduced a lot. Yeah.
That's good news. And I always ask my guests, if there was one thing you could do to change the world, what would it be?
One thing I could do to change the world. That's a difficult one. I mean,
You're probably doing it.
I would naturally say get our landscapes functioning. I think it's the most important thing we could possibly do, because it has the impact on the biggest part of the population. It impacts farmers who are producing food, and it impacts the consumers who are eating the food, and it impacts the climate. So, I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing I could possibly do. At the end of the day, at the end of my life, if I got to look back, I would hope that what I could see behind me were a whole heap of people that were better off, they had a healthier landscape, and they were feeding people that were healthier. I think I'd be pretty happy with my efforts if I could see that.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned climate. What effects does the landscape have on climate change? Oh,
massive. If there is such thing as climate change, I mean, the climate has always been changing throughout human history and before, so it's all just cycles really. But what can we affect? We have the biggest effect on the small water cycle, which is maintaining green surface area that keeps an area cool or moderates the climate at least. So any farmer or any person on any piece of land has the ability to do that. Doesn't matter whether you've only got, a quarter acre backyard or less. If you've got green plants out there rather than concrete, then you can impact the climate, because if you can manage manage the heat that comes from the sun every day with plants, then we haven't got the heat. There's much heat in the atmosphere that's not managed, and the energy, which is also the heat. So, yeah.
Great. And carbon neutral is also big in the news. What are your thoughts on that?
On carbon.
Yeah.
Well, carbon happens to be an essential element of life.
Yeah.
You know, you and I are pretty much made of carbon, so is everything else. So we don't believe that carbon is a negative. Carbon is there to be recycled. It needs to be recycled. What we have to make sure is that we've got enough green growing plants to be able to utilise the carbon that has been recycled. So if we are to be burning old carbon, being coal or oil, then we need to increase the volume of plants that we're growing to be able to manage that carbon. That's all. But the bigger, rather than looking at carbon as being an issue in that it creates or causes issues with heat, it's only such a small component of our atmosphere. It has no ability to do that. Not at the levels it's at. What we do have in our atmosphere, which is a greater contributor, and you could probably call it a greenhouse gas, that's water vapour. Why is there more water vapour moving around? Because we don't have enough plants managing it. So we end up with water evaporating from our landscape and not being managed by plants. Therefore, that is a greater greenhouse gas than anything else. So if we want to look at managing something to manage climate change, there's where our focus needs to be. I think the whole carbon thing is a focus on removing money out of the pocket of the people and distributing it to corporations. That's all. That's not going to do anything for climate change, if there is any such thing as climate change. It's going to do nothing to change that at all. Pretty sure that if it's all managed at a government level, then there's no benefit to the rest of the people. It's actually a negative. So I think for people out there, I would strongly advise that you do your research and find out just if carbon is actually the issue that we're told that it is.
Thank you. This has been an absolutely amazing conversation, and I know many people listening will benefit. And is there anything you want to share before we close?
Oh, I don't think so. We've covered off a few things.
Yeah. So where's the best place for them to contact you?
You can go onto our website for Tarwyn Park Training, so it's www.tarwynparktraining.com.au, or Forage Farms is www.foragefarms.com.au.
Great. Thank you, Stuart.
No worries. Thank you very much.